What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm going to be discussing my day one deck ideas for Grandmaster. Grandmaster was my scoopity whoop of the month. I think it is the best card, the best new card releasing in Spotlight caches this month. So I figured I would showcase some of the reasons that I think this card is going to be so much fun. I think one place that players are definitely going to be drawn to Grandmaster is in Silver Surfer lists like this one. As I described in my season review, Grandmaster is like Absorbing Man, but for half the cost. So any deck that is already playing Absorbing Man is probably going to want to play Grandmaster as well. The two key targets in this deck, of course, are going to be Silver Surfer, the namesake of the deck, but also Brood can work out pretty well with Grandmaster because you play Brood in one of those two side locations, and then you move it to the center and get to generate two more Broodlings. Now, I haven't actually played Silver Surfer myself in a hot minute because I don't actually own Sebastian Shaw, but short of that, I do think that Silver Surfer could be a pretty strong home for Grandmaster. There is one thing that you do have to watch out for though, and that's the fact that most of these cards have on-reveal abilities, as well as Dakin does have an on-reveal ability if you do choose to play this card as well, and that means that any of these cards could take the stage away from Silver Surfer. You don't have to worry about that with Brood because assumedly that location will just include Brood, the two Broodlings, and then the Grandmaster, so that can only hit the Brood, but any of these other things you do have to watch out for, and that could make playing Silver Surfer in this iteration a little bit more awkward. So I did want to highlight a few other cards that cost 3 that you might want to consider when you're thinking about Grandmaster. And I'll say consider because not all of these cards are treated equal. Let's talk about Storm first, because this is the most common card that I think you will see play alongside Silver Surfer. And with Grandmaster, you can storm 2 locations. There's also some other interesting stuff going on with Storm in that Grandmaster is a move card. And being able to move cards into your stormed location on the final turn or even on the penultimate turn does give a deck playing both Storm and Grandmaster a few more interesting angles to operate from. You can play turn 3 Storm, then play turn 5 Brood plus Grandmaster on one of those side locations, and that will fill up your stormed location, which can allow you to put a bunch of power there still yet on the final turn. So Storm can definitely be good for those reasons. I also think that Storm, and specifically Double Storm, is pretty strong because that allows you to get a guaranteed hit with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which is also a 3-cost card, so I think that can be a lot of fun. Crystal is a really powerful effect. The ability to draw a card in Marvel Snap should not be underestimated, and a lot of the decks that Grandmaster is going to go into are going to be combo decks or very synergy-based decks, so the ability to draw an additional card on top of that even could prove to be really powerful. On the other side of the field, and I'm just noticing that 2 of these cards are legendary border and 2 of these are inked. So there's definitely a distinction between the 2 categories of cards we're looking at on the screen here. Cosmo, though, that is going to be the bane of Grandmaster, and it might even be tough to play Grandmaster this week specifically, because people are going to be expecting it, and we're going to see a lot of turn 3 center lane Cosmo. Center lane Cosmo is just going to be a really straightforward game plan for any decks that can afford to do it. I will say Cosmo is a 3-cost card. The idea that that could slot into a Silver Surfer list potentially with like Gladiator is not totally out of the question. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is Green Goblin. I would certainly keep the goblins out of your decks this week, because if your opponent gives you a Green Goblin, you can send it right back to them using Grandmaster's trigger. But the deck that I am really excited for is gonna look something like this. Now, there's a few different things going on in this list, and I don't think that this list is totally optimized, but there's a lot of crazy things that a deck like this can do. So first off, there's ramp, and there's basically two different decks kind of getting melded in here with this image. The first is like an Electro Wave kind of Odin ramp deck where you're either playing like Gamora or potentially Vision on 5 with like Odin, Doctor Doom, potentially Leader. I've also found that Black Panther Arnim Zola is good in those shells, though typically those lists won't also run Wong and Absorbing Man. But this list is much more heavily focused on just specifically... This is the list that I am super excited for as far as Grandmaster goes. And this is kind of molding two different deck ideas. This is the list that I am super excited for Grandmaster, or if not the list, it's the idea. I think that there are two different distinct ways that you could take this list, and I'm kind of just showcasing the full combo so I can talk about all of the different potential combo elements that you could have. But I do also think it might be a magic list, so if you wanted to go like full combo, probably cut Doctor Doom and Gamora and play like Magic and Crystal or something like that. But the main combo in the deck is going to be playing Black Panther, then playing Arnim Zola, and then playing Odin. Or at least that was the main combo in the deck. Now the deck has so much more flexibility because now you can go Black Panther, Arnim Zola, and then Grandmaster on the final turn. Or, because Grandmaster is so cheap, you can go Black Panther, Arnim Zola, Absorbing Man, Grandmaster on the final turn, which is going to give you absolutely huge Black Panthers. Now, I did say that there's kind of two distinct ways that you can take this deck. I am playing Wong, Absorbing Man, Grandmaster, and then a full suite of ramp, so that way you will always have access to some ramp. The other directions that you could take it are actually to play less ramp, but more relevant cards to ramp into. So that's going to be things like Vision on 5, and then potentially adding in like Leader on 6, some other big 6 cost cards that you might imagine. Sandman is also a really good 5 in an Electro deck to just limit the abilities of your opponents to dump out a bunch of cards on the board. And then the other direction that you can take this deck that is pretty similar and has some of the same key pieces is going to be with Mr. Negative. Conveniently, Grandmaster can flip and be played for free thanks to Mr. Negative, so a list like that is still potentially trying to do Black Panther Arnim Zola things, but also maybe Null Arnim Zola things. Null Arnim Zola Grandmaster on the final turn. That costs you 0 energy. You can figure out what else you want to do on top of that. Typically, you're playing one of those 3 cards like at cost, and then the other 2 you are playing flipped, but that can lead to some really, really powerful final turns, and I think is going to be a lot of fun. Again, the idea that on the final turn of the game, you could play Absorbing Man and then Grandmaster, I think is going to be really, really powerful, and these are going to be some of the things that people are playing Cosmo for this first week to stop, because otherwise these things could get really out of control. 2 honorable mentions that I do want to talk about are going to be Move and then Discard, and then also kind of Destroy, just because I've been playing Destroy a lot now. I think that one kind of litmus test for all of these decks, and why for me they're just getting an honorable mention, is if these decks don't want Absorbing Man, they might not want Grandmaster. However, Grandmaster's a cheaper Absorbing Man. Half the cost definitely leads to more flexibility in terms of being able to slot these things onto your curve. So Ghost Spider, Doctor Strange, and Cloak, these are all really powerful on reveal abilities to trigger again, but I think the key thing that could potentially make Grandmaster work in a move strategy is the fact that Grandmaster does move cards, right? So that shouldn't be underestimated either. That is going to by itself give you a Craven trigger, and that's kind of cool. It means that you can move everything in one location with Cloak, Grandmaster it, and then the next turn move everything to a different location. And if you play Cloak Grandmaster on the 5th turn of the game, then turn 6, your opponent might just retreat, because that is so crazy that you have like unlimited potential for where you could wind up moving your cards, and that just makes a move deck very, very scary to get that double cloaked up trigger. On the discard side of things, I think that maybe I just kind of want to give a shout out to discard. I have not yet looked at next month's season caches, or spotlight caches rather, but I've heard that there's like some discard things coming up with next season. I try not to get too ahead of it, because there's so much going on in Marvel Snap like right now that I don't really look forwards towards the future. But hey, maybe discard will have its day in the sun soon. I do think that where Grandmaster could be at its best is alongside Ghost Rider, specifically because that's a great turn 6 play. You could go Ghost Rider Grandmaster, and then you are putting huge reanimated discarded cards in 2 different locations. So that actually does seem strong to me. I do think Colleen Wing's targeted discard, the fact that it'll always hit Swarm, could also be interesting, and the same thing could be said about Lady Sif, though that's a little bit harder to take advantage of if you're not Grandmastering your Ghost Rider. But Gambit and Moon Knight can also be pretty disruptive on reveal abilities, so they're things that I at least wanted to give a shout out. The other enemy discard cards, the disruptive discard abilities, are a little bit awkward to make work. Those would be White Samurai and Black Bolt. Black Bolt's a turn 5 play, so if you Grandmaster turn 6, it doesn't matter that your opponent's discarding cards, and White Samurai is awkward because it will discard Grandmaster most of the time. So those ones don't really work out, but some of these things could definitely be interesting things to try. But I think that there is one more thing to get excited for with Grandmaster, and there's one more thing that is going to make the deck really, really strong. So you can see I've got a number of junk decks queued up here to take a look at. 2 of these I saw in KM Best's recent video, and you can see these lists do not have room currently for Grandmaster. I don't know, just cut whatever. It doesn't matter. Potentially, possibly Alioth, though. Alioth. Sorry, I always mispronounce that card. But the reason that you could cut Alioth is because there's a new insane turn 6 play in Marvel Snap, and that's going to be Shang-Chi plus Grandmaster. So I think that people don't quite realize how oppressive this might eventually become, and this is a huge reason that I had Grandmaster on the top tier of cards to pick up this season. I was going to say at the beginning of this video that, like, I don't think I've been as high on a card on a new Marvel Snap release since Annihilus, but I think I'm even more high on Grandmaster. I think it's just going to be that strong to play a turn 6 Shang-Chi plus Grandmaster, and honestly, I think that that can go into almost any shell. I just think that the other on-reveal abilities that you'll find in an Annihilus deck are also pretty strong, so that's kind of where I'm looking at it in, but really, you can put it in any shell, and there are, like, the control decks with Serra and Zabu that look to play multiple tech cards on the final turn. With a Serra in play, you can play turn 6 Shang-Chi plus Grandmaster your Shang-Chi, and then Shadow King the 3rd location. What are people going to do in that scenario? That seems really, really tough to beat and really powerful, really strong. So I just have this deck on the screen because I think that there's some other really cool stuff that this deck in particular can do with Debris and Grandmaster. Again, you would have to find the room to throw Grandmaster in this, probably cutting Goliath, but Debris Grandmaster, and then Hazmat before you Annihilus and pass your opponent a whole bunch of junk seems really good, and there's a nice curve for that too. Turn 3 Debris, turn 4 Grandmaster Debris plus Hazmat, turn 5 Annihilus, turn 6 your opponent can't play. So that seems really, really sweet to me. There's also a bunch of cool on reveal cards in Hawk decks, so a junk Hawk deck kind of gets the best of both worlds as far as Grandmaster. Again, from this list, I'm potentially cutting Goliath or potentially cutting the Hood from either of these lists. I think that the card is just like okay, but I don't think that the Hood is super necessary. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about junk Bounce, which borderline, I was thinking about putting Beast in the honorable mentions category, but it is such a strong on reveal ability that just by itself has created archetypes that I do think it's probably worth experimenting with trying to bounce Beast. And then similarly, this list, I mean, you can play some number of tech cards with Enchantress, Shang-Chi, and Shadow King that you can double up on with Grandmaster on the final turn. So I think that all three of those junk angles are worth exploring, whichever flavor of junk suits your fancy, but really it's going to be that Grandmaster plus tech that I think is going to be really, really scary. So let me know what you are thinking of having fun with and playing with Grandmaster for your day one ideas. And I will probably have some Grandmaster content out soon because this is one card that I definitely do not want to miss. But for today, that's going to be it for me. I might stream today as well. No guarantees, but I think there's Twitch drops going live soon with Grandmaster's release, and I'm excited to play some Grandmaster, so I might hop on Twitch later today. But for this video, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.